You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company. It held up high. A lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khateeb.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another MedTech Growth Levers session, joined by my wonderful, devilishly handsome co-host, Orette Davis, founder of Mighty Orbit. Orette, how you doing?
Hey, doing good. Excited as always, to be here. We've got a good group growing us as well, too, as always. So looking forward to having the discussion here.
Absolutely. And just for note, for those who are listening to this on the podcast, you can sign up for these free weekly Zoom sessions. Just check the show notes below and click the link and sign up, and you can join. Today's session, we're going to be covering gated versus ungated content, how much time that we want to give a new marketing initiative, and of course, improving show rates on the sales side. Then we'll get right into some fun Q&A. So let's start with the first topic, and I'll introduce it, which is gated versus ungated content. For those who may not be aware of the term, when you come up with any kind of piece of content, let's say a white paper, an ebook, a new study, there's always this thought of, okay, we put money into producing this content, like why don't we collect email addresses and collect leads? So that's a traditional approach. There's a new sort of another side of that approach, which is to ask yourself, what's the purpose of this content? And should we be adding friction by making it gated? In which case you say, hey, we're going to leave it completely ungated, no email, nothing needed to view the content. So that being said, let me kick it off to Orette, and forget about, I don't want to hear, it depends on the strategy. If you gun to your head, you got to pick gated or ungated. What do you choose and why?
That's a good one. I can go either back and forth on this, but I'm going to go to the counterpoint that kind of what's currently popular right now. And I'm going to say gated. And my reason for that is it really depends on not so much what you do, like when someone signs up, but everything that happens afterwards. The big mistake that companies, sales teams, marketing teams make is they gate all this content, assume that everyone that puts in their name and email address is like a sales ready lead. They get looped into an automation. The sales team starts calling them and emailing them. It's just this never ending cycle. And the people that are there for that content, like they're not at that stage. Like they're not ready to speak to sales. They just wanted to learn from a resource. The reason why I say gated though is just, get the name and email, get that information. It helps you on the kind of back end. You can do some other things with that, better remarketing. But it also just helps you to build up your newsletter list, and email list. And then you can treat that as a way to further educate, but not necessarily push a direct sales. So I am for gated with an asterisk on that gated content.
Okay, I'll accept that. This is a tough one for me. So I'm gonna go with the context of medtech, and I'm going to say ungated. Okay, and here's the reason why: is that I feel like I don't think I've ever seen, I'm just thinking, I don't think I've seen a piece of content in our industry where I said, wow, this is so good, you should gate it. Okay. So let's start there. The other side of it is that what I always felt, going back to our topic last week, is top of funnel. The industry has a top of funnel issue, and part of top of funnel is distributing content and education at scale so that it can be consumed, and that the education process is what begins the process of behavior change. In order to change behavior, you have to A, get attention, and then B, actually educate somebody, right? And so because of that, I'm very much in favor of, hey, ungate the content only if, though, you have the right tracking pixel on there. So for every social media channel, you have a tracking pixel, you put it on there, and retarget people based on who clicked through on the ad or even landed on the landing page. And that's how you can remarket to those individuals. Because when you get the lead through gated content, the whole purpose is just to remarket to them. And so in that case, if you have other sophisticated ways of remarketing, go and do it. That all being said, I do agree with you, Orette, because on the other side, you have to also assume that a marketing department is at a level of sophistication that if they ungated content, they know how to retarget. And most of the time they don't.
So hey, Omar, if I don't gate my content, how do I get leads that my CEO is hounding me about?
If you okay, fair.
Marketing needs to get leads. If I gate this white paper, whatever, I can make my CEO happy, and now we can get a quote unquote get a bunch of leads. And I hope you can catch the criticism in my tone there.
Yeah. So
because
so we're doing a role play here.
This happens all the time, right? CEO says leads. If I gate this ebook, I can get 1,000 leads for you for pennies on the dollar. Let's go.
Okay. So role playing with this MedTech marketer. So Mr. MedTech marketer, your CEO wants to get a bunch of leads. I totally get it. Okay. What are you going to do when you accomplish that goal? Because you're going to hit it. You just got to put budget behind it. You're going to get a bunch of leads.
Yep. What
do you think is going to happen at the end of the quarter when you hand all of those leads over to sales? What's the next problem you'll foresee happening?
Oh, this is the forever cycle of this, is that none of those leads close. The deal pipeline is nothing. Like, I'm talking about 0.05%, or if not even less. And then you end up back in this cycle of sales versus marketing, right? Marketing got us all these leads, so they're all trash and none of them close. And the cycle repeats itself every single time.
Let me put on just for a second my Glenn Ross impersonation. The leads are weak. The leads are weak. You're weak.
Yeah.
End scene. And so I think it's an education thing where you have to talk as a marketer. Love you guys and gals. You have to have a backbone when you go talk to your CEO and your board. Otherwise, you will become their slave when it comes to the lead gen, like Ferris wheel. It's just going to go over and over again, and it's going to crash and burn. You have to stand up to them and say, hey, look, we can do that. Give me some budget. I'll get a bunch of leads. But we have, and this is a math problem. Too many marketers don't know how to do math. Okay. You have to say, okay, look, we have, I'm going to make this up. We have 10 sales reps. Okay. I'm pretty sure with a certain level of budget, we can get 500 leads. Okay. So of those 500 leads, assuming that every sales rep is going to work them equally, each rep is going to have 50 leads to work. Okay. 50 leads. This quarter has what? 4 weeks per month. So we do 4 times 3. That's 12 weeks. So then every single week, each rep is going to be expected to be working 4 of those leads at a time. The question is, which ones do they work? And so this is a problem. It's a resource problem. And so rather than saying, hey, we're going to get leads, the idea is we need to figure out which leads to get, right? And for many of you, when you're launching a new product, whether you're at a startup or say, I see a couple of people join from ConMed and some larger organizations. So whether you're at a startup or launching a new product at a large organization like a ConMed, a Stryker, et cetera, your question should be, okay, we do a booth, 100 people show up. Of those 100 people, who are the 2 or 3 that are actually going to be worth our time? You have to figure out where you're going to focus on, because you can't focus everywhere. You can't make everybody happy. Even the founder of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, talked about this, which is early days of Airbnb, their goal was to find 100 people who absolutely love them. Because you can talk to 100 people, you can figure out everything that they want, what made them interested in you, et cetera. And then they'll introduce you to other people who are just like them. You're better off finding the 100 people who are absolutely in love with you versus 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people who just like you. And in case of MedTech, you're better off finding the 3 to 5 people who absolutely love you versus the hundreds who are like, yeah, okay, cool.
I think this boils down to intent. And you talked about the people that love you. So how I look at this, and where I was getting out this whole line of was like, oh, I can bring leads. Like, our mandate is leads. It's the difference between a high intent lead and a low intent lead, and like those actions that someone's taking. And the same thing goes with the gated or ungated content, right? If you have some top of funnel, the 5 tips for X, Y, and Z, there's no reason to gate that. And there's very low intent behind a content or resource or something like that. And there's no point in sales teams going after those individuals. Versus you have something more bottom of the funnel that's much more higher intent, when someone's actually raising their hand and showing those signals, showing those buying or purchasing signals, or that they're ready or in that mode. That might make a little bit more sense to do that gated. So that way you can figure out what's the best approach, what's the best touch point, whether that's high touch, low touch, or whatever, to reach out and provide additional resources or ask questions and things like that. So yeah, I think End of the day, the gated ungated boils down to like quality, quantity, high intent, low intent, and then pairing those actions of your prospects and of your buyers with your actions on the back end as a marketing and or sales team as an organization.
Totally. All right. Before we depart the subject to our next one,
Yeah.
I think I might have a happy medium here. Would you like to hear the happy medium?
Let's hear it.
All right. So you have two worlds. Gated content, where we just get a bunch of leads. Most of them are garbage leads, right? They're just lukewarm. Sales team, which is marketing's most valuable and expensive resource, spends too much time on the wrong places. And the other side of it is you have ungated content, right? So you have full distribution. You don't have a bunch of leads because it's ungated. But your problem is like, how do we get that person who was engaged, right? So here's the middle ground that I found to be valuable, which is targeted paid ads using a digital opinion leader. Okay. So here's the ungated part. Let's say it's a PDF. Let's say it's a picture of one of your users, right? The key here is you have to have a physician or user in it. Okay. Something that's going to be recognizable. Okay. You put that out, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter. Okay. So it's a picture of that user, a white paper, whatever it might be. Okay. You put some paid ads behind it to start target. You can do it organically first and then do paid ads behind it later to target the exact user you want. The part where it's a pseudo lead gen is monitoring the people who like and or comment on that content, because that's higher intent. And yes, you don't technically get their email address, but then you actually know who they are. So when you see, oh, look, in this post that we did that we boosted, there's 30 likes. 3 of those 30 likes are surgeons that are not in our database. Now you can actually find ways to do outreach. Your sales team can be like, hey, I'll reach out to Dr. So-and-so on LinkedIn and Twitter and anywhere else. You guys have databases where you can pull, let's say, work email address, maybe find a way to get their personal. Like, you're going to have to do a little bit extra work, but at least the whole idea behind gated content, it's not necessarily the lead. The idea is you want high intent revenue opportunities. That's, I think, the happy medium. That's, I think, one tactic that I would encourage marketers to consider doing.
I think this discussion really boils down to being able to tracking and to report on those metrics. Very hard to report ungated, right? Like, how do I prove, like you said, how do I prove that XYZ, our target demographic, is engaging and reading these items? Ungated, you can always just say, hey, we've got all these email addresses. It's very easy to report back to the CEO, very easy to report back to the board. I think that's why the default is gated for most companies, is because of that. Requires some education from kind of the bottom up into why ungating, why we need to do certain things, and then changing how you report on your metrics. So how do people asking questions, the qualitative questions, like, how did you hear about us on your forums? So that way people can say, hey, we found out about you from XYZ resource, and you start to trace those items back towards the ungated content that you're making. And then seeing what influenced certain activities, using something like HubSpot. You can eventually, when someone does a demo form, you backtrack into seeing all the steps that they took leading up to the point where they converted. So it all boils back to this habit that a lot of companies have, wanting to be able to report on things very easily. Gated, ungated, hard to report ungated, a lot easier, simpler, but not always the best on gated. That's my kind of
100%.
Final statement there on gated, ungated content.
No, I feel you. That is a good one. I'm sure we're going to come back to that in the future. All right, next topic, 2 of 3 today. And this is an important one because in marketing, there's no shortage of stuff. I'm trying to keep this PG, stuff that you're being asked to do. So how much time do you give new marketing initiatives? Some of the marketers are going to start nodding right away, but like somebody has a VP or a CEO who comes in one day is like, hey, like I saw Flying Monkey social media platform, this new thing. What are we doing on there? Or I just saw, I don't know, name any Liquid Death doing this campaign. Why don't we do something like that? So it's no shortage.
It's always I saw our competitor or a friend of our friend said that we should do X, Y, and Z, and then immediately everyone has to drop. the ball,
Worse than
then do that.
let me put some salt in the wound. It's not the friend of the friend. It's like our board member,
Yeah.
who's like a gazillion years old,
Yeah.
thinks we should do this. Sorry, was that ageist of me to say? Yes, it was absolutely ageist. But like, I never hear this from the younger board member. It's usually a gazillion-year-old board member who's, I have a lot of money, and as a result of having a lot of money, I actually know everything. Here's what you guys should really be doing.
That's funny.
I may have lost some business on that one, but whatever.
I like Megan's comment, random acts of marketing. And that's exactly
Random acts of marketing. That's exactly. Oh my God, Megan.
Yeah.
Shout out to Megan. Oh yeah.
So to bring this back home, the question is, how much time do you give to marketing initiatives, and how do you think about this? And a lot of times when we work with CEOs, especially like newer founders, those that don't quite understand marketing, there's always this race of like, when are we going to get results? When are we going to get results? When are we going to get results? And we just launched campaigns an hour ago. Like, we're not going to get leads in an hour. We're not going to get leads necessarily in a few days. Like, we need time for these things to kind of work their course, right? So I view marketing initiatives in the span of like quarters and in halves, like a quarter and in like half, so in 6 months, versus necessarily looking at in like smaller timeframes than that. And the real reason is you need time for your marketing initiatives to really figure and work themselves out. And I like to bucket this into three buckets. Is like early on, like you're looking for like early positive signals. So, hey, our hypothesis, hey, we can get physicians on using Facebook ads. That's our like hypothesis. We think we can set a realistic goal. We're not going to fill our entire pipeline up this quarter, but we think we can get, say, 10% of pipeline, or we can get 20 physicians. So our hypothesis. But what's the early signals when you do launch that initiative? So are we getting engagement from the right target accounts, from our ICP? Are we getting in a trickle of leads? It's not going to be a flood, but if we can get one or two, we know that we can probably get more. And then from there, figuring out, great, you got these initial early signals. Things look good. We generally feel like this is heading in the right direction. It's given us enough positive signals to push forward to where we can test and optimize and refine the process. And I think companies miss out and don't give it to get to this stage. They immediately just want to cancel it. Hey, we did a webinar. We didn't get enough attendees. Cancel the webinar. But you did 2 webinars or 3 webinars. What happens when you do 12? But the companies just cut before they ever get to that point across a lot of different things. And then once you get past this like optimization, refining process, you've built out the SOPs, you have a system in place, like your team can launch and scale up campaigns or can launch or iterate over campaigns quickly. Then you move to the process of like scaling. This is where we pour in budget. We have our true KPIs for what we think these metrics or numbers can look like. And then from there, you refine that, right? Hey, can we do this on Facebook? Can we do this on LinkedIn? Hey, can we do a VIP dinners? Like, what does that look like for us? And build and refine. I see so many companies that do these things 1, 2, 3 times, and everyone gets, where are the results? It's too early, and then everything gets canceled. Or there's like these rapid changes, and you don't get enough time to ever like really dive down and learn. That whole opportunity is just missed.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think when it comes to new marketing initiatives, marketing is very good at setting what the KPIs are. But you have to think about before the KPIs, which is what are the expectations in terms of the timeline? You can't treat everything in like let me hit on something that's like a real sore subject for me is I'm sick and tired of hearing about this playbook that has coming out of like Intuitive or Johnson & Johnson or Medtronic. There's no playbook. Like what worked at Intuitive or J&J like 5 or 10 years ago is not going to work today. It's just different. So let's start with that. So the reason why I mentioned it, that every marketing initiative you do, including things that you commit to doing every year, let's say going to conferences, not only are there KPIs you need to hit, there's also learnings you have to get. What are we going to learn from this? Are we testing messaging? Are we testing engagement, et cetera? And you have to peel the layers of the onion back. For example, if your goal is, hey, we're like, let's use the webinar as an example. If you put the metric to the moment you put numbers to these things, That's literally what you're going to be judged by. And I don't like putting numbers to things all the time, because sometimes you're just trying to learn. So if you do a webinar, let's say I say you're going to do a webinar series, you're going to do 2 or 3 of these webinars, but every time you're only going to get 5 or 10 people to attend. Most people would say that would be a failure. What if I told you of those 5 or 10 people, 2 or 3 of them are like the chairs of the most important programs in the United States? That changes the conversation. So it's very important that as we measure the success of these campaigns, there's both qualitative and quantitative. And one last thing I want to just add to this, Oret, is on the qualitative, when you're presenting to the board, you should have quantitative numbers, your bar graphs, etc. You should have some qualitative, like screenshots of, hey, here's somebody who attended. Here's a question from this attendee. You need to have some qualitative to put into context why these numbers are good or not good.
I think having the right metrics early on is really key. So just going back to the webinar example, doing a webinar and never going through the entire process and having an immediate revenue KPI or target in mind when you've never done it and have no proof that you can let the webinar attendees will go through the process of actually converting it to customers. It's like a pretty risky place to be, right? And you have to be able to justify that and why we're doing this if you can't necessarily drive revenue. But I guess what we're really trying to say is level set expectations, right? Don't launch the initiative and say, promise the world and it's going to solve it's end of Q3, Q4. We're going to do this webinar and it's going to fix all of our pipeline issues. That's the absolute wrong expectation to set. So it's really just like level setting that expectation. And I think Omar talked a little bit about some of the qualitative aspects, but like in the webinar example, you do the webinar, you get your 3 or 4 high stakeholders, people there. That asset can be repurposed. It's not a one-off tool. Like it's a asset that can be spliced and diced, repurposed. It can be shared again multiple times on social, used for your newsletter. Your sales team can now use it as an asset for the follow-up. So it's not just that one piece. It actually can get layers of leverage with that one asset. And then I love that you mentioned the playbook. I literally was having this thought earlier today. Is that if the answers are there, like we can just copy the playbook from all these other companies.
Or Ed and I wouldn't have a business.
There would be nothing to solve for, right? Like you literally would open your playbook, follow it to a T, and have all your marketing sales problems solved. But that's not the case, right? Every market, every company is different. There's a process of testing and of experimentation of messaging that needs to go through that takes time to figure this stuff out. Because if it were easy, all these problems would be solved for. It's not
100%.
And that's why we have all these companies, why we have companies fail, because if the playbook were written, all the struggling companies would just execute the playbook and succeed. That doesn't happen. So there's no like playbook, right? There's best practices, follow best practices, but the playbook needs to be built on the fly as you learn from your market.
100%. And something I'll comment on, I want to defend my fellow sales leaders who are out there. I think too often a CEO and board will hire a head of sales, a chief commercial officer, without the focus of marketing and think that they're going to have all the answers. Put all this pressure on this person that, hey, we hired XYZ sales leader who's been in this specialty for the last 20 years. They know exactly who they need to talk to make this happen. And now there's all this pressure on that sales leader to use their own biases, in which case they end up saying, okay, I got to scale myself. I'm just going to hire the people that used to work for me in this specialty. So now you have an entire organization that's being driven by a bias of these are the right people, quote unquote, surgeons, physicians that we should talk to, when in reality, every single, and I really mean this, every single massive success in medtech started with a group of early adopters that was not on anybody's radar. Nobody even knew about them, but through the technology, through the product, through the company, that physician or group of physicians were activated, became key opinion leaders and digital opinion leaders overnight, and made the company who they are. And I think that you can really point this out when you talk to head of sales and head of marketing who've been running this kind of experiment for a year, and you say something like, it seems like there's not enough awareness in the market. Usually the head of sales, yes, exactly. I've been saying that the whole time. Like there's not enough market education out. And usually they're right about that. But the reason why that hasn't happened is that salesperson, their head of sales, has not gone to bat to defend and also protect marketing as they run these campaigns, because the CEO is just going to get pressure from the board about certain KPIs. Usually it's like leads because you can do a nice little math equation as to what the conversions are. And then marketing is being held to that. And then everything else just becomes random acts of marketing, as Megan pointed out.
That's great. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add on that. Yeah, I think this is a good spot for us to pause for a second and see if there's any questions on anything that we've talked about, whether it's gated, ungated, thinking about these marketing initiatives. Curious to hear those that are here, what your thoughts are on any of these.
Feel free to unmute yourself. You can share your thoughts on what we just discussed, or if you have a question about something completely unrelated to what we discussed, feel free to do that as well. Don't all go at once.
I really like that. Yeah, and I like the analogy there, the swings, so like the attempts at bat, right? You're not always, you'll eventually get the home run, but you have to have a lot of like misses and a lot of attempts before you can get there. And I really like that analogy. But yeah, 100 is a good number.
I agree with that. I think that's the other thing, is that because of the times we live in, things are moving so fast. And as a result of the evolution, or the fast pace of evolution of technology, we think that markets evolve that way. We've reached a point in society where technology is evolving way, way faster than humans are. And we underestimate how long it takes for people to change their mind, to adopt new behaviors, etc. And so sometimes I think with a lot of companies, they're thinking and measuring literally in months, when in reality, they need to be thinking and measuring in, I hate to say it, years. And a lot of companies are going to argue with that and say, we don't have years. I don't know what to tell you at that point. Like there's this meme I saw online where it's a picture of somebody sitting at the bus. Okay. Somebody sitting at a bus stop, and they get a text and says, hey, where are you? And the reply back is, I'm at the bus stop waiting. And the other person on there that said, okay, hurry up. And then the picture like zooms out and says, waiting faster. I feel like that's a lot of times what marketing is being expected to do, is make it go faster. Okay, great. No amount of money is going to make it better. And I try and explain this, or I'm wondering if you share the same thoughts, to companies where even if you had like millions of dollars for, let's say, paid ads as an example, that doesn't solve for the problem of time, right? Like hitting up, let's say, a prospect 10 times in a week with an ad is not the same thing as hitting up that same prospect 10 times with the same ad, but over a course of 3 months, right? There's seasons to things, there's timing, there's all these different things, all kinds of variables you don't have control for. And so too many times I think marketing on the growth side tries to look at these things as if they're like controlled experiments happening in a petri dish where all these other things aren't being affected.
I'll chime in on the money front, because I think that's an interesting one on the paid side, because with a lot of money, it's very easy for people to hide, right? Like companies, individuals, right? Like you can just outspend and throw caution to the wind. And we've seen this time and time again where we'll audit an account spending tens of thousands, $100,000, but it's towards the wrong keywords, like low intent keywords and all these other terrible practices, because they can hide behind the large ad spend or the large round of funding. And the second you take that stuff away or things get clawed back, very obvious like how terrible the marketing and operations, sales and everything is, because they can't hide behind just the being able to pour money at a problem. And we've seen this happen with the current state of the market and funding, where now companies are forced to be more capital efficient, forced to be profitable, and a lot of companies got basically caught red-handed because they were able to hide behind money.
100%. And just something else I want to touch on, Oret, is for me, I really believe that the most valuable and most expensive resource that marketers have is a sales team. And so a lot of times when marketers are gifted a lot of money, they often don't take into account, okay, yeah, sure, let's say I hit my KPI, whether it's leads or whatever that is the sales team set up in a way where they're going to be successful, right? And I think that more marketers think that way, the more they're able to activate certain levers that's going to help the sales team. So for example, if you're in a growth stage company and it's like, hey, there's certain lead expectations, certain conversion expectations, et cetera, then you as a marketer should start thinking, okay, like realistically, if each one of these reps is getting X amount more deals, You have to think about a rep's time throughout the week. So how do we accelerate pipeline for them? It could be that, hey, we should create like an on-demand demo, right? That should be one thing. Or maybe we should add some friction to when somebody jumps on these demos, right? And so you have to constantly be thinking, this is why I really recommend to most marketers, if you haven't quote unquote carried the bag, you haven't been in a sales role, that's okay. But you should be spending a lot of time with sales, learning about selling, learning about what they go through, because it's only going to enhance your abilities as a marketer, because marketing is just sales at scale. And if you don't have that understanding, like, you're really handicapping yourself. All right, let's see. I wasn't monitoring the chat, so I need to go in the chat and see if there's any questions. And feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, and I was seeing if there's any questions. I'm curious to hear, going back to our gated, ungated, curious how many of you your organizations are gating your content versus ungating your content. It's the first question I have for the group here. Just circling back, I'd love to just get that survey done. Small sample size, but
All right, let's see. Yeah, go ahead and just comment in the chat. Does your organization gate or ungate most of your content? Let's see. We have gating.
I know where this is going.
So quick question, and again, I don't know if everybody else here are marketing experts. I am not. I am a business owner, a product creator. So this marketing thing is crucial for my business, but I'm not a marketing person. So I'm just, to be clear, when you say gating, that would be an example of me creating a lead magnet that's really good for my customer. And I dangle a carrot in front of them and then ask them if they want to download it, and they give me their email. So that would be gated, correct?
That's correct. You have to give some information to get access to whatever it is. Cell phone, email, something.
Okay. And then if I post, say, research about my product on LinkedIn and I just post it, that's ungated.
That's ungated. It could also be on your website. So there's a lot of ungated content where I go to somebody's website and the white paper is right there for me to download.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. So it looks like
We got a small sample. Here's a
small sample.
If there's any more comments on gating.
Let's see. Most are, so both. Okay. Yeah. And I think that, again, the question you have to ask yourself is not necessarily, will somebody download this? What's the goal of all content is not to generate leads. The goal of all content is to educate and change behavior, right? And so especially if you're new to market, you have to, in my opinion, make it easier for your prospect to get educated and get access to that content. And I think let me touch on the gated side. Okay, you commission some research report. Let's say you have some white paper or something, right? If you gate it, gating it is already adding friction to the process. You don't have to go, and this is where I see a lot of medtech companies mess up. They put too much friction. So they ask first name, last name, email, your job title, your NPI number, your hospital, like all these questions. It's irrelevant. It's too much, okay? Because you have to ask yourself, is what I'm providing so valuable that someone's going to go through this absolute pain in the butt process to get it? Likely it is no. And so I always recommend make it easy. First name, last name, email, and that's it. If you want to add an extra field where it's just job title, that's totally okay. But if you get their first and last name and email, you should have somebody internally that can go and research and pull all that other information. Make it easier for that person to just quickly get access to this thing. Keep in mind, people are doing this from their mobile phones. They're at their work computer. So every second counts, and they might get a text, they get distracted, all these things. And something that Oret's mentioned in the past, and I always like to think about, is that monitor your own behaviors as a B2B and B2C buyer. Because then you'll start noticing like, oh yeah, like how many times have I seen like this one white paper and I'm about to download it and I get distracted, or it's just the form's too long and I'm like, whatever, right? So you have to always keep that in mind. There's UX and UI that should go into consideration when it comes to your lead magnets.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Yeah, please.
Okay, so again, disclaimer, not a marketer. My question is, I get all the time bombarded, people on LinkedIn, emails, whatever. Hey, I just did a quick look at your website and I noticed you're not doing this, or, oh, I could generate this much more of this. And my question is, like, I'm a physical therapist. If I assess your need, I would hope that if 10 PTs assessed your need, we would be within 3 commonalities. It should not deviate more than 3, what we think is wrong with your knee. I would say 1, but whatever. But with marketing, what I'm finding is someone will send me like, these are the 10 things that you need to be writing blogs about. And then someone else sends you and they're like, no, these rank best, the 10. Like, I am telling you, yeah,
Sorry.
it is frustrating to
Let
be
me-
like, what am I supposed to write about to get the biggest bang for my buck?
Yeah, let me tell you why. All right, jump in, but the reason why is that versus physical therapy, I'm not a physical therapist. If I'm at Thanksgiving dinner, I'm not giving my advice about how to rehabilitate your knee 'cause I don't know anything about that. But when it comes to sales and marketing, everyone and their mother has an opinion about this. And especially the people who decide to do this for a living. And so some of that advice is good. But again, this is why I'll give you a great example. Between Orette and myself, we would do 10 times better than, let's say, the biggest marketing agency in the world. The reason why is that we have very specific knowledge of digital health and medtech companies, right? And so that's the differentiating factor. There's all these other marketers that focus on top of funnel stuff. Write these 10 blogs, write these things. All that is fine, but that's why you have all this deviation, because part of marketing is science, but a lot of it is, it really is art. Even the funnel, look, I mentioned this last week. Yes, funnels are great for visualization to say, hey, people start top of funnel, middle, and bottom. I've seen people in my own funnel as a business go straight to the bottom. They've never consumed anything from my podcast. They've never done anything like this. They just literally come straight in. One of my clients, actually, they've been with me for 8 or 9 months. They never consumed any of my content. They came in straight to bottom of funnel because I think they heard about me through somebody and they're like, oh, you should just talk to this guy. So it's an art and a science, and it's a practice that you're constantly refining and questioning and improving on, which is why in 2024, there is no playbook.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Orette.
Yeah, I agree. It's marketing is definitely art and it's science and super subjective, and there's everyone's lots of opinions. It's very opinionated as well too. And how I generally view it is everything can work given enough time, enough resources, following the right process. Like, it all can work, right? SEO can work for you, ads can work for you, webinars can work for you. All of it can work. It's just a matter of identifying what levers to pull, how difficult any of these channels or tactics can be, and then going through the process of, I'm not called like the science experiment of experimenting of the various channels, right? So there's no, like we've talked about this earlier, there's no immediate playbook. I can't just tell you here are the 5 things you should do and your company will win. You'll get everyone in the market. It's a process of experimentation, right? And everyone has their opinions, and like I said, they all can work, but it's just a matter of time, the resources or the cost that's going to take you to get there. And I think as a founder, like, time is working against you, and so are your resources. So how do you minimize your time and minimize your resources to maximize your result, right? And so that's where that process of elimination really comes in, where it's, you know what, our quickest path to success is doing ads or doing XYZ instead of doing something else someone else might recommend.
That's exactly right. I had a question that just came into me privately. Again, anonymous question. The question is, I'm laughing because I have like PTSD from this, which is, I love my sales team, but as a marketer, I feel every other week they're coming to me with some shiny object they want me to pursue, and the CEO is pro support the sales team at all costs. How do I manage this? All right, do you want to take this first? Because I'll just rant on this, but
I don't
okay.
want to go first on this. I have a lot of thoughts. I'll hold them.
Yeah. So I think, okay, I love salespeople. I love sales team. I'm a salesperson myself. So I think from one side, it's very easy as a marketer to get super frustrated with sales and just get annoyed, because unfortunately in our industry, a lot of marketing is looked at like a service department. And it's, oh, that's the place where I just go and write a ticket of here's what I want, and I'll put it in there and it'll spit back out in a week or two. So you have to have some empathy as to why that's happening. As a salesperson, sales reps are out on an island by themselves. They're away from their families. They're getting, oftentimes, especially if it's a rep, abused like by hospitals. They literally have to go into hospitals. If they have to scrub into surgery, they have to pay extra money, get these certain like really crappy scrubs. They have to put a red hat on. Like it's all these things. So it's rough. It's rough being a salesperson. At the same time, the reason why they're asking for these things is that a lot of stuff that they're doing is just not working. And so they're hoping that this one thing is like the unlock. This is where, as a marketing leader, you have to have a very good relationship with your head of sales. If that is not there, you're in trouble. I don't know what else to tell you. And so you have to have alignment with your head of sales and to say, hey, look, and again, you don't want to approach this from a combative standpoint, which is tempting. You want to come at it and say, hey, look, here are the requests I got from your sales team. These are the current projects we're working on. We have room for like maybe one more thing. If we commit time and resources to this, like I'm going to be very clear to the board that like, hey, sales asked for this. Which one of these things is most important? And if we actually do it, for example, make a new deck or make this video or something, do you really feel this is going to help your pipeline, or would you prefer that we focus on these other things? You have to give them the option. You can't just tell them yes or no. You have to give them the option and have that kind of conversation. And if they're having difficulty having that conversation, at that point, you got to get a little bit more creative as to like, how do you get that sales leader on the same page as you, so that you guys are looking at the problem of revenue and pipeline together, versus what it's often is that marketing is focused on product management, KOL development, all these things, and sales is on the hook for revenue and pipeline. That's the problem, is that when you have more ownership of revenue and pipeline, you start thinking about that more as a marketer. And now you're working more collaboratively, objectively with sales. And now you solve the problem together. I can go on for a long time for that. It's a very complicated, it's a simple question, but a complicated one.
Omar, can I comment?
Who's that? Oh, Aaron Chester. Aaron Chester is a VP, great VP of sales, and one of the, I think still it's a top 10 episode on my podcast. So go and check it out. Aaron, thanks for joining.
Wow. Yeah, I want to learn more about marketing. I've been a sales guy my whole career, and that's why I jumped on. I'm obviously subscribed to this, and I listen to your podcast. But yeah, salespeople take a beating. And what I say is, if you bat 3 out of 10 times in the major leagues, you're in the Hall of Fame. In sales, if you bat 3 out of 20 or 30 times, you're probably in the Hall of Fame. You're right. They're always looking for that something, this will help me get the business, because they do get abused. And so I think what you said early on in the session is, if sales and marketing are talking and the folks from marketing are out with the reps, they see what the day-to-day is, they hear the objection live and in person from the hospital administrator, the surgeon, whatever your call point is, they begin to understand. I think it's super important that there's a big time collaboration between head of sales and the head of marketing, because you're right. We can do 4 or 5 things. We can't do 40. And if you have a big scale sales team that's 200, there's a lot of requests. So we've practiced that same thing here, is we try to get really focused on what's the most important thing that will accelerate revenue growth. So just my 2 cents, bud.
No, I'm so happy you chimed in on that. Aaron, I'm wondering, just in your experience, where have you seen the biggest mistakes made on the side of like marketing that like you would advise a young marketer, like try and avoid these kind of mistakes?
Yeah. And I've been around for a minute or two.
With sales, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. So the biggest pitfall would probably be to sit in a room with some other marketers, come up with a great campaign or a great idea to pitch a product, and don't ever get any feedback from the sales team. I've experienced that, not necessarily in my current role, but I've experienced that. And they come and they say, look at this amazing thing that we've done for you. And we're like, that's tone deaf. It's not going to work. And we've never met, but it's nice to me. And I see you shaking your head because you know that's happened to you. Yep. And anybody that's in marketing, we have these really great things. The customer's going to love it. It's going to generate leads. It's going to generate interest. And it's not. So pressure test things, throw things out. So we're thinking about this, get some opinions. And you can't get every opinion, because that's not productive either. But you get the very best salespeople you have, and maybe a couple sales leaders, you'll get on the right path quickly, I think.
100%. And again, I think as marketers, it's very easy to not do that, to just sit in the ivory tower at corp and be like, we're going to come up with this thing, we're going to roll it out. But you have to force yourself to do the hard thing of saying, hey, I need to not just get the head of sales. Let me back up for a second. When I started off in marketing as a manager, okay, so I was not a head of marketing, I was a manager. The way I saw the dynamic between marketing and sales was very much like I'm in a movie and it's like a mafia movie, The Godfather. So I have to go and network and do these side deals because at the end of the day, I don't know if what I'm about to do is going to work or not, but I need sales to have my back. So a lot of times, yeah, I'll talk to the head sales, but then I'll say, hey, like, who on your team do you think I can get some feedback on? And they'll tell me who those people are. I'll go and just talk to those people. That doesn't mean I take the feedback, but just that sales team knowing that, hey, the marketing guy actually cares about my input on this and is asking for my help. And a lot of times, again, from the filter of this is like a mafia movie, I'll talk to sales and be like, hey, look, like for this to go well, I need the whole sales team to execute this one thing. They're all not going to do it. Can I rely on you just to be like this shining example? Like I'll promote the hell out of you to the CEO and to the board, but I need a few like early adopters. So just like you have the technology adoption curve for the market, you have a technology adoption curve internally as a marketer, right? So for your campaigns, for your strategies, whatever it is, you're going to have quote unquote innovators in the sales team who are at the very beginning who can see the vision without seeing the product and say, yeah, like I'll adopt this thing. This is exactly what we need. And there are people who are later in the adoption curve who they're not big on it and everything, but they're going to adopt at some point later because it's so successful that they just have to, and it's now part of process. You have to know that. Not every salesperson is created equally.
Agreed.
If I got Aaron Chester's buy-in on that, then I did well on that one.
It's true. Like
That's
you launch a new product and you have a third of the sales force that won't touch it because it's unproven. Then you have this third that they're all the way in. And then you have the middle that they're like, hey, I'm going to wait and see a little bit. It's just an adoption curve. It applies to everything, really.
It really, yeah, it's like my favorite thing. I use that for so many things in life. We got a few more minutes. Any other questions? Any comments? And again, it could be about what we're talking about right now or completely unrelated. We like taking random questions about something, a problem you guys are dealing with.
I'd just like to say on topic here, and again, disclaimer, I'm just a product, whatever. But I didn't even know the difference.
Real quick, there are people I know who've been in marketing for 10 years and they still don't get it. So don't worry. You're not being a marketer.
Okay, and even the difference between marketing and sales, but I'll tell you what I made the mistake of, and people allowed me to do it, was spend all this time and money on marketing, branding, messaging, and all this. And then when we added the sales component, we missed the boat, meaning once the salespeople heard about what the product could do, their brains went in 80 different directions that I didn't even think about because they're talking to the customer, say the surgeons, and they've heard their headaches for years. And so they saw, oh my God, your product has a solution that I didn't even come up with. Like you said, there's a balance between I spent way too much time and money and very limited resources that I had on marketing only to redo everything. Once I got salespeople, I thought it was marketing and then sales. I actually disagree. I think it should be reverse engineered. Get marketing good enough and then send it out there and let the salespeople come back and look at common threads of the objections and put them in buckets. You'll have outliers like you need to do this, but then you'll have a common theme of this is what you need to do to make it better. And then you make it better and your marketing team helps you figure out how to make it better, market it better, message it better, whatever. But yeah, I think it's, again, sales, I think is, sorry, marketers, but I think if you don't go to sales first and find out what they're hearing from the front lines, you're missing the whole boat in your little office. My marketing team did a great job of messaging and making everything look great, only to find out it was the wrong message.
No,
it's
100%.
Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's that. And then sales really is. And I recommend every single marketing team, every marketing person to sit in on the sales meetings to get those insights firsthand and to see the objections and to hear it directly from the voice of the customer. In addition to like gathering all the feedback from the rest of the sales, but like that just has to be such a critical part of the process because marketers, I think Aaron, you talked about this, they'll come up with fancy campaigns, this fancy messaging, and then you put it in front of the customer and it doesn't resonate. It's total trash. That happens way too often. And you need this collaboration because that's the only way it works. Otherwise, you miss out on these cycles if you don't have this close working relationship between sales and marketing, and you lose months, quarters, years of time on the wrong things.
No, 100%. Again, as I always like to say, The sales team is, as a marketer, sales is your most valuable and most expensive resource. And so you really have to utilize it. We're at time. Before we do, as always, everybody turn on your cameras if you don't feel shy. Turn on your cameras. We're going to take a quick family photo, post it on LinkedIn, because we're going to try and drive this up. We've got plenty of people who've been joining. We want to get to a point where we get like 100 people at a time on these. So turn your cameras on. We'll give it one more second. If you can come on camera, that'd be really appreciated. There. Oh, I love it. Everybody's coming on camera. Fantastic. Here we go. Okay. One more second. All right. Everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Don't forget, this is going to be going on the podcast. So go check out State of MedTech. You can find these episodes by just looking for the marketing label or MGL, which is MedTech Growth Levers. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb, with my co-host, Auret Davis. We'll see you all next time. Thank you. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.